Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. If you're new, please like and subscribe and leave a comment with some of your thoughts as always. I'd like to see what people are saying. Before we begin, as I announced last week, we will not be having a show next week. I'll be graduating from college this weekend, so this will be the last episode as a college student. However, I will be back the following week on December 22nd as usual. I've never taken a week off before, so I think a short break for college graduation is an acceptable reason. This episode is going to be a shorter episode than usual. Politics has slowed down as I warned it would as we approach the holidays. So let's start where we did last episode, a special election in Tennessee. This was a safe Republican district, and it still is in many regards. But as I explained last week, the result was really never in doubt. Instead, it was how much the Republican would win by. On election night, betting odds showed 90% a GOP win, which is indeed what happened. However, as of this recording, Republican Representative-elect, actually he's the representative now, Matt Van Epps, only led by 9 points, which is a dramatic reduction from the 22-point lead President Donald Trump had in the district last year. I'll also note that the turnout was quite high here, at least it's higher than expected. If you live outside the US, if you live in Canada, Europe, or Australia, you'll be shocked to know that we consider 50% turnout to be pretty normal. In America, above 60% is quite high. Turnout was about half of 2024's, and it was a little bit higher than it was in 2022. So that's a strong sign for Democrats that they are getting their voters out. And then I would have compared this to 2018, but the districts were completely different back then. This was a swing of about 6.5%. The margin, as I said, reduced 13%. It's a strong showing and matches what we've seen in other races across the country. However, at the same time, I want to caution anyone from drawing too much at this moment. This was a single seat, and it got national attention, and no party next year will be able to throw the kitchen sink at any single seat anywhere in the United States next year. At the same time, I read an article in The Hill which reported that Democrats were feuding once again about ideology and whether they should tack to the left or stay to the center. Some people will argue that if Democrats hadn't picked the AOC of Tennessee, they might have won the seat. And I tend to not agree with that, and I'll explain it in a little moment. Some people, they would subscribe to that thinking. However, Afton Bain did extremely well in Nashville, or at least the part that was her district as a state representative. Her progressive policies and identity really helped her there. The problem was that it really turned off voters in wealthier areas of the district in the north and in Clarksville. So I try not to take too much from one election, as I said earlier. However, I think this once again shows that Democrats can't run any candidate anywhere, which is something they should have already known. At the same time, if they ran a more moderate candidate, for example, who didn't support defunding the police in 2020 and didn't call themselves a very radical person when she was tailing state troopers and ICE officials. Gee, I wonder why she didn't appeal to wealthy people, by the way. I'm just kidding, we all know. But anyway, if she had run a more moderate campaign that might have cost her votes in Nashville, and she might have gained some more votes somewhere else, I still don't think she would have won. And that's kind of why I don't subscribe to that thinking. I'll also say this, because there are plenty of people who voted for Epps because of their panic over Bain, and as a swing voter, the more I found out about her, the less I liked her, which is usually a very bad sign. Without getting too much into it, you can either run a base campaign where you try to turn out your base, and that really only works in leans or likely seats in a wave year for your party, or you can move to the center and try to appeal to those voters. One of the benefits that nobody talks about trying to appeal to swing voters, is that, especially in a wave year, is if you can pick a vote from the center, that's actually a gain of 2, because you would be converting an Epps voter into a Bain voter. So that would be the same thing as pulling in 2 undecided voters, because it would bring the Democrat up 1 and the Republican down 1. Speaking of Congress, let's move over a little bit. We have a very Congress-themed episode this episode. Usually we don't have one like this, but here we are. And if you remember the Republican government shutdown back in October, November, I guess some people would call it the Democrat shutdown, it was over Affordable Care Act subsidies implemented during the Biden administration and the coronavirus pandemic. Democrats wanted to renew them, or at least a vote on renewing them, and Republicans refused to budge. In the deal to end the shutdown a month ago, Republicans promised to hold a vote. It appears that there will be no vote in time before the December 31st deadline, and after that, premiums are going to go way up. 60 votes would be needed to bypass the Senate filibuster, so it would need at least 60 votes in the Senate. And good news for anyone who wants these subsidies extended is that there are probably enough votes in the House of Representatives to pass it because 213 Democrats and only a handful of Republicans would be needed. And that's assuming President Trump signs the bill, which unfortunately has no guarantee that he would. So let's talk about these subsidies and I'll provide my thoughts. It was a $35 billion a year. It was passed in 2021. It only lasted 4 years, and it was during the failure administration. And the goal was to cap premiums at 8.5% of an enrollee's income. So what are the politics of this? Well, Republicans have complete control of the government. As with the shutdown, I'm fairly confident this will fall back onto them. We are already staring down a recession, and President Trump was blamed for the shutdown a few weeks ago, so they do not want to blame for this as well. So if I were the Republicans or Republican leadership, or if I was one of their advisors, I would tell them to vote to extend these subsidies, but to have them fade out over the next few years so people aren't hit with a massive shock next year when the premiums skyrocket. Democrats are not going to go along with this, though, so that might not pass. However, considering Congress has a handful of Democrats who are actual pussies, like John Fetterman, that might actually work now that I think about it. The problem is, every new policy we spend should be costed for. Everything you buy in your household is costed for, and the government should be the same way. And I'm not going to go on this deficit rant again, I do that a lot. But I will say it's awfully strange how we have completely divorced spending and raising revenue. It's not how state and local governments do things. Moving on, and I think this is more interesting, and that's the potential moves to oust Representative Mike Johnson from his position as Speaker of the House. The last time was led by Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. She's now resigning, and it might be led the next one by Representative Elise Stefanik of New York. Interestingly, Nancy Mace of South Carolina, one of the three richest of the Republican Party, is considering resigning from Congress. Meanwhile, Representative Anna Pauline Luna of Florida got a discharge petition through to bypass him and force a vote on a bill to ban stock trading. So what does this mean? Well, this means that there are clear moves to undermine Johnson and his leadership. And that's what I'm thinking could be a problem for him in the future. The thing is, there's always been dissatisfaction with his leadership since he took the gavel 2 years ago. I think the question is it more widespread now than it was back then? And if so, has it reached a critical mass? I think there is evidence for that. Representative Kevin Kiley from California, a Republican, has said, quote, "Rarely have things been completely harmonious in the conference, but it does seem that there is an unusually high level of discontent," which could be telling. Considering Representative Kiley is going to be forced out of office because of redistricting in California, he has little reason to save Mike Johnson if he doesn't like him personally. Republicans are reportedly furious that Johnson has been very passive about redistricting this year, and in all truth, there really wasn't much he could do about it anyway. And considering Republicans were the one that started it in Texas, unless he was able to convince them not to do it, then I don't see what else he could have done. Representative Stefanik told the Wall Street Journal, and by the way, she is a powerful member of the House. She was the chair of the House Republican Conference for a few years, and said if Johnson were to face a vote today, he would lose. And I believe that is true. The question is, are they going to move to oust him, and if so, what are they going to do to replace him? If they try to assassinate Johnson metaphorically, then they're going to want to avoid several days or weeks of self-destructive chaos that they had in 2022 after they tossed the last House Speaker. And by the way, unlike in 2024, Democrats are not going to save Mike Johnson. No way in hell. They did that in 2024, as I said, and I bet they're regretting it now. If you listen to the very first episode back on the show in May of 2024, I predicted that he was going to get tossed as Speaker before he was voted out by the public, and the jury is still out on that one. So how could Johnson fall? Well, there are two realistic possibilities. First, his conference pressures him to resign. This is how John Boehner was kicked out in 2015. This would be done internally and behind closed doors, depending on how much Johnson wants to fight it out. The other option, and this would be more chaotic and I guess the more exciting option, is a vote to remove him. This would only happen if he refused to resign like Kevin McCarthy did in 2023. Back then, any member could introduce a motion to remove the Speaker. It only needed one person. Now it must be a member of the majority party, and they must have 8 co-sponsors of the majority party. So 9 Republicans are needed to oust Johnson, assuming all 213 Democrats supported on the final vote, which they would. This would be the end of him. It would be 222 to 213. And the move to oust McCarthy back in 2023 was led by Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, then Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, and that succeeded 216 to 210. One last thing, and I'll say about this is there's usually a catalyst. When McCarthy fell, it was because he got a deal to fund the government back in September of 2023. More Democrats voted for it than Republicans, and even though Republicans had the majority at that time and still do, a whopping 90 Republicans rebelled, which was a fatal blow to his authority, and the rest is history. If he falls, it's going to be because of a catalyst. So what might that be? Well, it just so happens we are facing another government shutdown on February the 1st, and maybe that could be it. Who knows? We'll have to see what Republican rebels are demanding. Either way, Johnson might be a dead man walking. Either the electorate or his own party will pull the plug on him. His term as Speaker will be over in about a year. Lastly, Trump controversially pardoned Representative Henry Cuellar. If you want to learn more about this, his name is spelled Cuellar. It's pronounced Cuellar. He was indicted by the Biden administration in the spring of 2024 for money laundering, bribing, and acting as an unregistered foreign agent accused of taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes from an oil company in Azerbaijan. He would have faced a trial in early 2026, and Trump pardoned this guy. He wrote on Truth Social, "Henry, I don't know you, but you can sleep well tonight. Your nightmare is finally over!" And I thought this was a little weird, but I just let it go because I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Whatever. Then, a couple of days later, Trump made a long Truth Social post about the Biden administration pursuing Henry Cuellar because Cuellar is a conservative Democrat who wants a strong border. And for context, this guy represents a district along the U.S.-Mexico border. So Trump gave him a pardon and was furious when Cuellar announced his re-election as a Democrat, and Trump accused him of working with the radical left scum. So in the same post, he accused the Biden administration of going after a good, principled congressman and a political enemy of the Biden administration, but then also said this same poor congressman was working with the radical left. He said, "Such a lack of loyalty in all caps, something that Texas voters and Henry's daughters will not like," end quote. So basically, Trump was expecting Cuellar to switch parties, and he didn't. He was trying to bribe this guy. The irony is that Trump gave Democrats a big gift by helping them put this thing away and helping them secure this House seat, even as the Supreme Court upheld the Texas map that the lower court had struck down. I talked about that a few weeks ago. So if anything, it's even more likely Democrats are going to win control of the House. And I'm going to warn progressives, though, before they get too excited. This guy is not an AOC type by any stretch of the imagination. He is a conservative Democrat who is tough on the border, and he is staunchly anti-abortion. He's very socially conservative. I guess the ultimate irony of it, zooming out, is that Trump pardoned a criminal, and the criminal turned on him. That's what you should expect. He faced several challenges from a progressive in a primary several times, but lost, and he remains in the House of Representatives. In a year like 2026, and in the times that we live in, these polarizing times, every single seat matters. Alrighty, that is it for this week. A little bit shorter than usual. Hope you enjoyed it. Once again, there will be no episode next week. We will be back on December 22nd. So that is all for now. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll be sure to respond. Bye-bye.